Hello, and welcome to my video on the full history of Queen Elizabeth II. In this video, we will cover her entire life and reign as the Queen of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms. Elizabeth II had an extraordinarily long reign, the longest in British history at over 70 years. She lived through tremendous changes in the world, serving as a source of stability and tradition during times of upheaval. Join me as we go through the key events and milestones of Elizabeth's life and reign as Queen. Early life. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. She was born on April 24, 1926, in Mayfair, London, to Prince Albert, Duke of York, later King George VI, and Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. She was delivered by cesarean section at her maternal grandfather's London house. She was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. She had one younger sister, Princess Margaret, 1930-2002. She was third in the line of succession to the British throne at the time of her birth, behind her uncle Edward VIII and her father. She was baptized by the Anglican Archbishop of York in the private chapel at Buckingham Palace on May 29, 1926. Her godparents were her paternal grandparents, King George V and Queen Mary. She received her early education from her mother and governess Marion Crawford. She was also tutored in constitutional history. She accompanied her parents on their royal tour of Australia and New Zealand in 1927, at the age of 1. She became heir presumptive in 1936, when her uncle King Edward VIII abdicated. Her father became King George VI, and she became first in line to the throne. During World War II, she gave her first radio broadcast in 1940 at age 14 to boost British children's morale. She lived at Windsor Castle for safety during the war. At age 18, she began carrying out public duties and made her first overseas tour in 1947. She also joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service and trained as a truck driver and mechanic. Birth. Her birth was a difficult one, with the Home Secretary present to verify and announce her birth. This affirmed her status as third in line to the throne. She was named Elizabeth Alexandra Mary after her mother, great-grandmother Queen Alexandra, and grandmother Queen Mary. Education. She was educated by her mother, not at school. She studied arithmetic, British history, art, literature, music, and French. Her governess Crawford, called Crawfie, had a major formative influence on her. Crawfie left when Elizabeth was 18, and they remained close friends. WY. During the war, Elizabeth made her first radio broadcast in 1940 when she was 14. She spoke to evacuee children sent away from their families, emphasizing courage and comradeship. This helped boost British morale. She later trained as a mechanic and military truck driver with the ATS, Auxiliary Territorial Service. Marriage. Elizabeth met Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark in 1934. After a courtship, they married in 1947 when she was 21. Philip had to give up his Greek and Danish royal titles and became a British subject before their engagement. On her wedding day, Philip was made the Duke of Edinburgh, heiress presumptive. In 1936, after King Edward VIII abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson, Elizabeth's father, George VI, ascended unexpectedly as king. This made Elizabeth heir presumptive and next in line for the throne. She assumed more public duties and gave speeches on radio to prepare for her future role as queen. Queen Elizabeth II's children and descendants. She had 4 children with Prince Philip: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Charles, her eldest, was born in 1948. He became the Prince of Wales in 1958 and succeeded her in 2022 as King Charles III. His children with Diana are Princes William and Harry. Anne, born in 1950, is the Princess Royal. She has 2 children from her first marriage, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall. Prince Andrew, born in 1960, is the Duke of York. He has 2 daughters from his marriage to Sarah Ferguson, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. Prince Edward, born in 1964, is the Earl of Wessex. He has 2 children with Sophie Rhys-Jones, Lady Louise, and James, Viscount Severn. In total, the Queen had 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren, the youngest being Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor, daughter of Harry and Meghan. 3 of her 4 children divorced: Charles, Anna, and Andrew. The marriages of her younger generation have proven more stable. The Queen's children and grandchildren have undertaken royal duties to support her work as monarch. She began delegating more duties as she entered her 90s. Queen Elizabeth II's status as heir presumptive before she became queen. The term heir presumptive refers to the person who is first in line to inherit the throne, but whose position can be displaced by the birth of someone with a greater or equal claim. Elizabeth became heir presumptive in 1936 after her uncle King Edward V abdicated, which led to her father becoming King George VI. She was 10 years old. As the king's elder daughter, Elizabeth took precedence over her younger sister Margaret in the line of succession. However, her status as heir presumptive could have been superseded if her parents had a son. A ruling king's son would typically have a stronger claim to the throne than a daughter. During King George VI's reign, there was speculation that Elizabeth's mother, also Elizabeth, might give birth to a son who would displace Elizabeth in the line of succession. However, no son was born. Elizabeth held the title of heir presumptive until her father's death in 1952. After she became queen, her eldest son Charles also became heir presumptive as the next in line. The position of heir presumptive contrasts with an heir apparent, who cannot be displaced in the line of succession by any future birth. So in summary, as heir presumptive, Elizabeth was first in line to become queen, but it was not guaranteed. Her accession to the throne secured when no brother was born to supersede her claim. Queen Elizabeth II's reign. She succeeded to the throne in 1952 upon the death of her father, King George VI. She was crowned in Westminster Abbey on June 2, 1953. Her reign lasted for 70 years and 214 days, the longest of any British monarch. She celebrated her Platinum Jubilee in 2022. She was Queen of the United Kingdom and 14 other Commonwealth realms including Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Her reign spanned the tenures of 15 prime ministers, starting with Winston Churchill. She modernized the monarchy, embracing media and public engagements. She also helped stabilize Britain during a period of rapid decolonization and social change. Notable events during her reign include the end of the British Empire, the Cold War, the Space Age, joining and leaving the European Union, the Troubles in Northern Ireland, Margaret Thatcher's premiership, the passing of Princess Diana, Brexit, and the COVID-19 pandemic. She hosted over 110 state visits for foreign heads of state during her time as queen. She met with 12 out of 14 sitting U.S. presidents from Truman to Obama. She celebrated her silver, golden, diamond, sapphire, and platinum jubilees marking 25, 50, 60, 65, and 70 years as queen, respectively. Her marriage to Prince Philip lasted 73 years until his death in April 2021, at age 99. They had 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and 12 great-grandchildren. Queen Elizabeth II's death. Queen Elizabeth II passed away on September 8, 2022, at the age of 96 at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Her death came 18 months after the death of her husband, Prince Philip, who passed away in April 2021 at age 99. The Queen's health had been in decline in the months leading up to her death. She had pulled out of several public events due to ongoing mobility issues. Her death was formally announced by Buckingham Palace several hours later, as they waited for members of the royal family to be informed first. She died peacefully in the afternoon, surrounded by members of the royal family, including her eldest son and heir, King Charles III. Charles, who immediately succeeded her as king, paid tribute to his mother's lifetime of service, saying her death was a moment of the greatest sadness for him and his family. Her coffin lay in rest in Edinburgh for 24 hours to allow the Scottish public to pay respects before being flown back to London. She lay in state in Westminster Hall for 4 days, where hundreds of thousands of people lined up to view her coffin and pay respects. Her state funeral was held at Westminster Abbey. Charles and Camilla, now the king and queen consort, stayed at Balmoral overnight before returning to London to make his first speech as monarch. In his speech, Charles called Elizabeth a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. 2 days after her death, her coffin was transported by hearse through remote Scottish towns and villages, so local mourners could pay respect. Tens of thousands lined the route to bid her farewell. On September 13th, her coffin was flown back to London, accompanied by her daughter, Princess Anne. It was driven to Buckingham Palace, where huge crowds had gathered to witness its arrival. That evening, all 4 of her children held a vigil around her coffin in Westminster Hall, where hundreds of thousands would later queue to view it. Her state funeral was unprecedented in grandeur and scale. It was the first state funeral in the UK since Winston Churchill's in 1965. Over 200 world leaders and royals attended. An estimated 4.1 billion people globally watched her funeral service on TV, making it one of the most viewed events in history. She was interred next to her husband and parents in St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, after a committal service. The Queen was finally laid to rest after over a week of national mourning. Queen Elizabeth II's death and funeral. Cause of death. No official cause was given, but she was reported to have experienced age-related mobility issues in recent years. There was speculation she may have passed from natural causes related to old age. Tributes to the Queen poured in from around the world. Thousands left flowers outside Buckingham Palace. Major landmarks were lit up in purple, and church services held to honor her life and service. Operation London Bridge. This was the codename for the meticulously planned protocol and national mourning plans following the Queen's passing. It touched on everything from government operations, public memorials, funeral arrangements, and Charles's accession as king. Lying in state, an estimated 250,000 people paid respects in person as her coffin lay in state for 4 days in Westminster Hall. The queue stretched for miles along the River Thames. David Beckham was among those who waited over 12 hours to view her coffin. Jewels. On her coffin sat the imperial state crown, orb, and scepter, indicating her role as Queen and Supreme Governor of the Church of England. A wreath contained plants representing the UK and Commonwealth realms. Funeral guests. In addition to family members, British politicians and world leaders, 200 recipients of the Queen's honors were invited, including volunteers and key workers honored for their pandemic service. Burial site. She was buried in the King George VI Memorial Chapel, which also houses the remains of her father, mother, and sister Margaret. Prince Philip's coffin was moved so they could lie together. Queen Elizabeth II leaves behind a monumental legacy after her 70 years on the throne, longest reigning British monarch. Her 70-year reign was the longest in British history, enduring through enormous change. She provided stability and continuity for the UK through decades of social, political, and economic upheaval. Modernized the monarchy. She evolved the institution, embracing media, public walkabouts, and community engagements. She maintained public interest and made the monarchy more accessible. Unwavering sense of duty. She worked tirelessly into her 90s and led by example. She carried out her role as head of state with grace, equanimity, and professionalism, becoming a globally respected figure. Helped dismantle colonialism. She oversaw the largely peaceful transition from empire to multiracial Commonwealth. At her 1953 coronation, she described the Commonwealth as a free association of independent, sovereign states. Elizabethan era of British history. Her reign defined the Second Elizabethan era, seeing immense social change in areas like racial issues, women's rights, technological progress, access to education, media, and culture. British national identity. She came to embody British identity, values, and culture. Her strong sense of tradition and history connected contemporary Britain to its past. Global soft power. Her use of royal diplomacy greatly boosted British interests. She met over 500 world leaders. She was the most widely traveled head of state in history. Charity work. She was a lifelong patron to over 500 organizations, taking philanthropy seriously. She chaired or was president of 95 charities and military associations. Her legacy will be one of dutiful leadership, stoicism, and guiding Britain into the modern age over 7 decades. She leaves an indelible mark on British society and history. Queen Elizabeth II's titles, styles, honors, and arms. Titles and styles. At birth in 1926, she was titled Her Royal Highness Princess Elizabeth of York. In 1936, when her father became King George VI, she became Her Royal Highness the Princess Elizabeth. She was known as Lieutenant Elizabeth Windsor while serving in the Auxiliary Territorial Service in WOT. After marrying Prince Philip in 1947, she held the title Her Royal Highness the Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh. When she became Queen in 1952, her official title was Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of her other realms and territories Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith. Honors. She held numerous honors including the Order of the Garter, Order of the Thistle, Royal Victorian Order, Order of Merit, and Order of the British Empire. She was patron or president of over 600 organizations, military associations, and charities. Arms. The Royal Coat of Arms of the United Kingdom, adopted at the start of Elizabeth II's reign, bears the arms of England in the first and fourth quarters, Scotland in the second, and Ireland in the third. It incorporates symbols representing countries of the former British Empire, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Ceylon, and Pakistan. Queen Elizabeth II's ancestry. She was born into the House of Windsor. This royal house was founded by her grandfather, King George V, in 1917. On her father's side, she is descended from the German House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Her paternal great-great-grandmother was Queen Victoria. Her father, King George VI, was the second son of King George V. His elder brother, Edward VIII, abdicated, making George VI the heir apparent. Her mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, was a member of British aristocracy. She was the youngest daughter of Claude Bowes-Lyon, 14th Earl of Strathmore and Kingorne. She is descended from England's two monarchs, Henry VI, Edward V, Mary I, and Elizabeth E. Her ancestry can be traced back to Henry VI, who ruled 1405–1509. She is also descended from the Stuart King James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England and Ireland. He ruled from 1603–1625. Her ancestors include King George I, King George II, and King George III, who were the first Hanoverian monarchs, ruling from 1714 to 1830. Several of her ancestors were German nobles. Her family name Windsor was adopted in 1917 due to anti-German sentiment during World War I. Her ancestry reflects centuries of European royal intermarriage between British, German, Danish, and Greek dynasties. Queen Elizabeth I lived an extraordinary life as Britain's longest reigning monarch. She guided the monarchy and her country through decades of change. Elizabeth was a symbol of tradition, but also modernized the crown. She celebrated her Platinum Jubilee in 2022 at the age of 96, after 70 years on the throne. Her reign spanned some of the most remarkable times in British and world history.